my brain is spinning here, and I want to ask a lot of questions. Carbon score, SDG impact scores. How can we move forward in a positive and constructive manner? I think you mentioned off camera earlier about an event that Calyx just hosted in New York during New York Climate Week with
That's right.
Onesot.Earth.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about that for me? I read it online, and I really want to unpack that with you.
Great. Look, yeah, we did something together with One Shot, Calyx Global and One Shot together during Climate Week, where we hosted closed door an event around looking at what can be done on those credits that do well, except on the dimension of overcrediting. Yeah, it's a bit of saying, hey, we have all these credits out there. Can something be done? And I have to emphasize, it's something we're exploring, we're experimenting with.
But you're in the lab trying to find solutions.
Exactly. And so what we did together with One Shot is say, let's break this one open. And this in this case was I think it was a landfill gas project that did well on all the dimensions of our greenhouse gas rating, except on overcrediting. Yeah, we looked at, okay, well, what's in the overcrediting, and within overcrediting, we look at baselines, we look at leakage risk, we look at project emissions. We came to the conclusion that, hey, if that project hadn't claimed 1 ton, if it had claimed for less, it would have been okay. So turn that equation on its head and say, well, do you need to retire more than 1 credit to be able to use it to offset 1 ton? And the answer is yes. And so we did the math with the data that now exists. And One Shot launched a adjusted portfolio. In other words, a bundle or a portfolio that compensates for that overcrediting problem. And then we put a rating on that of A+, saying, well, as a bundle, this represents an A+. Now, obviously, it requires transparency because trust is
critical.
Essential, right? People don't want to, oh, what kind of hocus pocus did you do? But as long as it's transparent, it's well measured, and it's communicated clearly, then I think that's one area how you can start fixing the market. Now, it's obviously not the only avenue, but I think this is an encouraging one.
I think it's really encouraging, and I think it deserves recognition for a number of reasons. Essentially, there's an acknowledgement that the carbon market is not perfect. I don't think anyone in this space really ever claimed for it to be perfect. I think we've been fairly open to the criticism and acknowledge that trust is essential. Trust has been eroded, and we want to regain that. These types of initiatives do that, I believe. And essentially, it's applying a fairly pragmatic approach of risk-adjusted returns effectively from portfolio management, essentially, right? And so in this case, you're applying it to existing projects. But can I just extend that to maybe what's the potential that in the project design, maybe for the next issuance, that the project developers, the proponents, essentially embrace this as a way to maximize the outcome, the rating, and if there's a correlation with the price to the rating, which I believe that there is, and we can go into that, how do we incentivize them to do that?
I want to first acknowledge you for putting a very important point in there in your question, Renee, which is trust and credibility are essential if we want this market to grow to its full potential.
Oh yeah, people talk about scale all the time, and it's not possible without trust. It's the core ingredient.
I'm glad you're using this platform to make that point. But back to the question here about how can we help the development of new projects towards that higher level of quality and integrity. I think there's a couple of mechanisms. The one that I'm hoping will start filtering through, and I'd love to hear what you think about how much of that is already there, is basically to see quality as part of price discovery.
Oh, absolutely.
To see that happen.
That was my dream on the exchange side.
Exactly.
To usher it in. Effectively, when you came to me, when other folks from other rating agencies that are innovating in and around the space, that was a light bulb moment. I said, oh my goodness, I can just see a future where there is a differentiation. So basis spreads. If you have a mean, everything adjusts in terms of that spectrum, and the price is relative. And if it's really, really, really hard to get that A+, well, guess what? There's a big spread with regards to the pricing. If it conversely on the SDG side, the Viridios folks doing a really great job around that with an AI model, and their thesis was very simple. I thought it was ahead of their time. It was really audacious, but that projects that differentiate themselves on SDGs that are really, really, really hard to demonstrate extract a significant premium in the marketplace. And I thought that's fabulous.
And imagine if we now can back that up with, hey, how strong is the evidence behind that particular claim? That ought to make that even stronger, that feedback loop.
Yeah.
So
And then the
that-
noise also goes away, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's objectivity. It's like data. It's like, look at the science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we are very hopeful that we're going to see more and more of that feedback loop of connecting quality to price happen in reality. I think it's mostly anecdotal at this point, but I'd
Sure.
love to hear if you have more data on it. But we're hearing anecdotal evidence of projects that are doing well on their ratings on both the carbon side as well as on the SDG side, fetching higher prices.
I can reinforce that, but I can only do so anecdotally in this forum.
Yeah.
But I think we've had it off camera previously, and then ultimately what it is it's an ecosystem, it's a network, and you need to have, from the ecosystem analogy, cross pollination. From a network, data sharing, right? And so rating agencies need to work with exchanges that have this price signal and data, and distribute that around. Hey, what is the correlation here with regards to a high rating? Does it fetch a premium, or conversely, a project with a low rating is it trading at a discount?
Right.
And if that thesis is correct, test it with the data. Great. That's a reinforcing feedback loop over time. And as we start to distribute it, it's no different to other asset classes. Let's look at bonds, right? In the debt markets, you have ratings and they play a significant role in terms of how these instruments are priced. Why ought carbon, an emerging asset class of the future, be any different?
And we're the anecdotes we're hearing is a broker here who says, hey, these landfill gas projects, there used to be a lot of this particular credit, it's got a high rating. These guys are totally sold out now. They're trying to figure out how they can do the next project because they're loving it. Just recently, I was talking with a trader who was starting to tell me about the price sensitivity of the ratings data, which is a new thing for all the ratings agency that forces us to act with supreme integrity to make sure, hey, it's starting to become price sensitive data. We need to be careful about that. So that's important for all of us. So that's one feedback loop. Higher prices, therefore, what do I do as developer to get my project there?
Again, your North Star, you're helping to shape the market towards that outcome.
But I think we also have an obligation to come out with material and insights and transparency about how we do our work that allows developers to look at it, to understand it, to digest it, and to include that in their thinking about how to develop projects. For example, around RED, a much discussed project type.
Sure.
We published a report a few months ago calling How to Turn Red Green.
I like that analogy.
Where we had 6 pieces of advice for project developers, ranging from the baseline. You need to choose an appropriately realistic, between brackets, conservative baseline. More attention to the permanence of the project, longer project timelines, longer commitments to do monitoring. And
that'll also beget greater and longer tenors on the offtake side.
Exactly.
Because if clients have that confidence in the longevity and quote unquote permanence of that project, then they're essentially more willing to do that longer term offtake. One, very selfishly, they want to hedge that price risk. But if they know that project is of unimpeachable quality, then it's a no-brainer for them.
And we made 4 other recommendations, one around additionality, making sure that there is clear evidence of prior consideration. In other words, that carbon was clearly considered before the start of the project, as well as an analysis of the financial impact of carbon, as well as on leakage, to really conduct a proper estimation and include that estimation in the calculation of the VERs. And so on. So we made those recommendations, and we want to do that across more project types so that we give more guidance to the development world. And what's really encouraging then is to hear from a developer actually here in the region. I'm sure you know them as well as I do. Told us after we published that paper of How to Turn Red Green, saying, Duncan, we convened our development team. We looked at our entire portfolio of projects, and we screened them for those 6 recommendations that Calyx Global made. And we're taking action where we think we still have some improvement to do.
That's great.
But that's the kind of impact we're looking for.
And so now dialogue,
that engagement,
it's a positive feedback loop here.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And so that's true stakeholder engagement, everybody working collaboratively as opposed to this tribalism and almost destructive kind of vitriol that happens in and around markets, which is fine again, but it's actually constructive and it helps to move the agenda forward. So I think that's fantastic. So cheers to that. I think congratulations on making those 6 recommendations.